Hey everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. Hope you're all doing good today. So we're going to be turning up the hybrid burl and purple, green, black swirl. So blurple, I should say. Looking forward to this. So this was made with Red Mallee burl. And one thing I want to note about some of the Australian burls, some burls in general, they might have some cracks. Especially, I'm trying to think of what there was another pen that I did, and it kind of has little cracks in it. So just be aware of that. One thing that I did when I was after I drilled out and I was gluing the tubes in, was I actually just doused the inside with some of that super thin CA just right off the bat and just let it fully dry, just to let that kind of creep into any little cracks that are in the wood. There are some on the outside still. Let me switch to the overhead here. There still are cracks, and I didn't fill them or anything. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually hit this thing. I'm probably going to take like a few passes, but I'm definitely going to be kind of filling that just because I don't want something, a chunk to break off or anything like that. But overall, I don't anticipate any problems, hopefully, but looking pretty good. I'm pretty excited about these blanks. They turned out pretty cool. Great color combo by the Cooper. I like how there's like different colors in this burl, different kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like there's like the early wood and dark wood or I don't know how that works with burls, but in trees, the stuff, the parts that are closer to the middle are usually darker than like the furthest out, I don't know, the most recent tree ring part. And I don't know if that's how this works or what, but it looks cool. So I'm pretty excited. One thing I wanted to mention also, I've been listening to, I got to make sure that I get the right name. I've been listening to the first few episodes, but I've been listening to a podcast. Oh, that's me. Hold on. How this works or... Shush. Where is it? Oh yeah, that's right. Listening to a podcast about pen turning. It's mostly focused on like the fountain pen stuff. That's part of the reason why I kind of started getting into this. But as the pen turns, Brad and Jason over there, pretty awesome podcast, especially if you're interested in the fountain pen world, like custom pen making. They talk about, like metal lathes, the process, the business, and just kind of gets you up to speed on that world, which I think is a little bit different than just like the kit pens. Just a little bit, a hair different kind of world over there. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. I've been listening. I think I'm on like episode 15 right now. So, and they got like, I don't know how many, like 50 or something like that. So I got a ways to go, but I've learned quite a few things, but it's also just kind of enjoyable. I like podcasts in the shop, especially ones that are just kind of, you don't have to like super pay attention to every single word that people say. Something nice to kind of work, listen to while you work. So anyway, oh yeah, storms everywhere. Man, this winter has been nuts. We haven't had like any like scary storms, I wouldn't say, for the most part. I mean, there's been pretty bad driving conditions over the passes, but we're still getting snow in Tahoe. And the thing that blows my mind is two of the ski resorts, or at least one of the ski resorts that I go to all the time, like they're limiting operations, and I'm like, there's like 10 feet of snow. It's not like it's melting. Stay open, guys. We get the best winter of like ever up here, and why would you close early? I just don't get it, but whatever. I'm not running the show. So you just turned your first pen. That's so cool. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, lots of I remember the first pen I turned. I took a class up in Reno, and I was actually, I think I probably mentioned this before on the show, but I was like the reason I wanted to learn how to do wood turning was for like table legs and like furniture, like bigger things. Not so much like bowls and things like that, but bigger kind of, I wanted to be, or knobs, I guess that's another thing for furniture. So like I had like this super focus, and like the intro to turning, wood turning was like pen turning. That they didn't have like just like intro to wood turning in general. You had to take the pen 101, and I was so mad at the time. But man, I'll tell you what, my first so I took a class, and I was so terrible. Oh my God, the pen, I don't even know what happened to that pen. I didn't keep it because I was so mad at the whole thing. But I was pretty terrible the first time, but I'm the type of person that like the first time I do something, it's terrible, and then I need to kind of practice like hardcore, focus on something for like a week. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of understand what's kind of going on with this now. But anyway, so let's see, who was here first? Mike McEwen was here first. And Hugh's going to watch the replay. That's cool. Kim's here. Oh, Kim's in and out. That's cool, though. That's cool. And Gene. And KidCooper's here, of course. So if you guys don't know, he took the day off today to watch this pen because this was kind of his baby, his project. And so he took the day off. That's dedication. I appreciate it. And Dominic's here. Let's see. Who else? Who else we got? Who else? If I miss you, I apologize. Lilia's here. Bicep surgery. Ow. That sounds horrible. Ugh. No fun. No fun. Broom Rider. Congratulations on that first pen. That's really awesome. And Mark's here. Let's see. Who else? Daryl's here. Cool. Yeah, you guys need rain down in Florida. Yeah, the weather patterns this winter have been, and I guess spring now, have been kind of weird, I think. Not the typical over the last like 5 years or so. So anyway, I'm going to switch cameras. Let's get over on the lathe. So one thing I wanted to mention. So last week I was kind of pulling out kits. And I need to actually stock up on some kits again from Turner's Warehouse. But anyway, the kit that I pulled out last week, and I was so proud of myself because I actually, one of the reasons why I stick with some of the same kits, like the Cigar Junior series and the Sierra or Wall Street or any of those, is they use the same tubes, and I just buy the powder coated tubes, and so that way I don't have to worry about painting tubes and all that. I always forget, and then I'm like, oh, I got to do it tomorrow or before the stream, and that's not going to work, And I was so proud of myself so that I painted the tubes ahead of time and I was all ready. And then I realized I took the blank and I was about to cut it up to get things prepped on it. And this kit, the Mirage, I didn't think about this. It's not a Junior Mirage. It's just called the Mirage. And these tubes are actually longer than the blank was. Even if I wouldn't have had a kerf cut for where you cut it in the middle, they were hanging over the blank and I was like, ugh. So we had to switch things up. So we're going to go with the Junior Anthony, which I think is also going to be a really cool kit for this. It's actually titanium, I think, black titanium. So it's pretty much like a gunmetal, but it's a Junior and I knew it would fit and I had one. So let's switch over to this view. So I really like this one, and I think it's going to go well. It's got kind of gold accents with it. So let me get this thing undone here. So, we got our gunmetal. But I think that gold is really going to look good once we get this thing polished up and we get the wood looking good. I think it's going to really match well with this blank. And so on the finial, you got that kind of, let's see if I can get this thing to focus. I don't know if you can see that or not, but anyway, that's what we're going to go with for the kit on this one, Junior Anthony. Like I said, I was kind of bummed, got to be honest. I was getting everything all ready, and not to say that kit was going to be like super, like the perfect kit for this. There's a lot of things that would go good, but we had it all picked out, and I was all on top of the game with the painting of the tubes. So for anybody that doesn't know, I just wanted to make sure that there was no see-through parts. So I decided to I always paint the tubes because you don't want to find out after you've turned the pen that you should have painted the tube, And so all I do is I just use I think it's what is this stuff? I don't think it really matters, basically, is what I'm going to say, but Rust-Oleum Ultra Cover. I just get this stuff at Home Depot. I don't think it really matters, but it is kind of nice that it's good to find one that's like kind of made to be like a primer and paint, I would say. And then this thing also says also bonds to plastic. If you were going to paint the inside of your blanks, you would want something that makes sure that it's at least says that it's it'll bond to plastics. But for tubes, it doesn't matter. But that's what I use. Doesn't really matter. Don't put a ton on, because if you put like a huge layer of paint on these tubes, then you might run into issues using your standard drill bit. It may not actually drill a hole big enough to fit that paint and the tube. So just put a nice thin coat on. Usually if, in the case of those blanks, I put them over there. I'm not that worried. It's not like it's going to be transparent. You might be able to kind of see through. It's going to be kind of translucent if anything. In that case, it doesn't need to be like absolutely perfect or anything like that. You're just trying to cut down that brass color that can kind of shine through. If you're going for like a really clear, transparent blank, that's when you want to just paint the inside of the blank in most cases, because otherwise you're just going to see the glue splotches. They're going to be between the tube and the blank. The glue goes in between there, and there's nothing you can do. There's going to be splotches. There's no way to get like an even coat of glue between those two surfaces. So paint the inside of the blank in that case for super transparent things. For things that are just, it's got mica powder in it, but it may get a little thin in some spots, especially the ends of the barrels, or ends of the blanks. That's when you're getting it really thin. Make sure that that's kind of just painted so that you don't see brass showing through. It just doesn't usually look that good. Yeah, $15 hybrid. What are we talking about? Oh, you like that kit better? Good. What were we talking about with the blanks? Oh, slim lines. Yeah, I started out with slim lines too. I like thicker ones, so that the slim lines a lot of times, especially if you don't get the thicker center bands, you guys might have been talking about this, they get so thin that sometimes especially if you're doing like a fancy blank that's got a lot of things going on, it gets so thin that you can't see as much of the blank, and that it's just like a kind of a personal thing with me. I make the blanks, so like I want to keep as much of the blank as possible, so I kind of just got away from slim lines. But they look great. And I think that the best way to go is you can find thicker center bands. That way it's almost like a cigar thickness, cigar style pen almost. But you can keep it a little bit bigger on that middle part and keep a lot more of that blank. So that's just something to kind of look into. I switched to that eventually too. All right, so let's stop talking. Let's get over on the lathe. Let's turn this thing up. See what's going on. I gotta get back to get my phone set up here so I can see the chat. I got a little magnetic doohickey that'll hold it. Now I'm gonna be using a standard carbide, I think, today, unless I get like a big chunk out or something. Partly because I just don't want to switch it out, but sometimes the standard carbides cut hybrids a little bit better. It'll cut that wood and the resin with no problems. What can happen sometimes, and I might actually just switch out and see how things go, but sometimes the negative rate carbide cutters kind of, it's a really dusty, like you're not getting cutting as much with the negative rakes on wood in some cases. So we're gonna see how things go. I'm gonna see if I don't have a backup so a blank setup or anything like that. So if I'm starting to feel like maybe that's a bad idea, I might switch it out. You can get through the wood with a negative rake, no problem, but sometimes it doesn't cut as well on some woods. So you can kind of switch back and forth. In general, I think negative rake is a great way to go when you're dealing with resin or plastics. But and another thing, actually, when you're knocking the corners off, sometimes a standard regular non-negative rake cutter will do that a little bit better as well. It'll just kind of get you through that stuff. One little trick, and I don't do this, I know Chad does this a lot, but if you look into like the machining world for like metal lathes and stuff, they use a very fine point cutter usually when they're like knocking materials down, like not much of the cutter is engaging. You're not engaging a lot of material, like in this case. Let's see, can you see this? Where, you know, like this they call the rougher. Well, if you were to try and rough this and take like a cut across the entire side of this plastic, it's a lot of material and it can kind of catch a little bit. So one thing you can do is just use the corner. You're probably going to wear that corner out really quick. That's one thing I'll mention doing this, but you're engaging so much less of the material that sometimes you can knock things down a little bit if you're using carbide, that is. Just random thoughts in Zach's head today. I'm just talking. I gotta do something different here. My banjo's in the way. Don't you hate it when your banjo's in the way? All right, let's see here. Oh, Cooper, are you looking to get into pen making? Oh man. Yeah, the chat, you're gonna get all kinds of good suggestions from our chat. People watching this show, no pens. But you can get into it for fairly cheap. You know, you don't need the best thing on the planet. Lathe wise, you can get like a pretty cheap one and still make some great pens. Find out if you like it, you know. All right, so we got this thing maxed out speed wise. Let me get the tool rest just a little bit closer. I just want to look at this wood and see what's going on with those cracks. Oh, this one's not very cracky. Not a lot of cracks in this side. There was a lot more in this one. So I don't have to really worry too much about that, I guess. All right, we got the one end round. Stop and take a look at this guy. See where we're at here. Get you guys in a little closer. Might be a little bright. I don't know. I'm gonna go look at the other screen. Is this blown out pretty well? That's not too bad, it doesn't look like. Oh, that's good. It's bright, but not blown out. All right, so we're almost round. Getting some pretty good patterns in there. Definitely like that. A little bit more black in this area. Looking good. I think we're gonna get even more kind of color patterns going on once we kind of get into the meat of the blank. The outsides of blanks a lot of times are deceiving. It's one of the nice things about resins, you know, if you swirl things up, like almost every pass you take, you kind of expose different, you know, patterns and things. Let's see here. Tim, 85 pens in the last 6 weeks. 14 more. Nice. That's so awesome. That's awesome. That's really good. Congratulations. Yeah, traditional tools do take a little bit longer. I think if you're just going to get, you know, and I don't know. There's something to be said. Like I know some people that do pens and like they just use a skew chisel for everything. Maybe have like a parting tool, and that's great. But man, I'll tell you what, if you screw up with a skew chisel, like usually like screw ups mean like it's over, like bad kind of thing. And I tried doing that for a while, and I just kind of gave up. It was just too high risk, you know, unless you can really get, you know, that good at it. But with, you know, just your traditional gouges and all that stuff, I think the tough thing is you got to learn so much sharpening and angles and all these things. There's a lot to kind of understand. Plus there's technique. Whereas, you know, if you go with carbide, it does, I mean, that's why they call them easy wood tools. They all work the same way. You're going to hold them, you know, perpendicular, flat to your workpiece. And so I think, I don't know, a lot of pen makers really kind of go for carbide, especially if that's all you're doing. I think there's definitely something to be said for like bowl gouges if you're going to do bowl turning. I think you can probably, you know, especially if you're doing like green wood, I think you're better off going that route with traditional, you know, gouges. I think it gives you a little, especially depending on how deep you want to get into it. I think there's more, it's going to be quicker probably, and there's more control. But for most things, I don't know. I mean, carbides just work out of the box. You're up and running, and I think for beginners, not having to buy and learn the sharpening side of things, I think it's kind of almost a no-brainer. Especially if you're not entirely certain, like, if you're like, I want to kind of test it out, see what's going on, but you're not 100% sure that, you know, this is going to last. Maybe it's a phase. I think carbide's a good way to go to kind of dip your feet in the water. But I mean, I use them all the time, and you know, I kind of prefer them typically for most things at this point, because I just don't really have to worry about anything. Plus, most of the stuff that I do is like pens and small things, so I think it's kind of an easy way to go. If you're going to get into, like, especially if you're doing spindle turning and you want to put a lot of details and things in there, you know, there's the detail tools, but you know, with a gouge, you have a little bit more control over the turning of it, and I think it gives you a little bit more control with gouges in that case for spindles. But you know, like I said, I think carbide's a good way to go for most people getting into it. So again, I'm using the standard carbide, so it's not negative rake. And what the advantage to this, the reason that I'm doing this is, what ends up happening is, your resin is going to be a different density and hardness a lot of times than your wood. And one may be harder or softer than the other. And so in these transitions, what can happen is the negative rakes can kind of cut the softer material a little bit deeper and struggle a little bit when you get into the more dense stuff. And I find that the standard cutters kind of handle this hybrid thing a little bit better. So it just kind of depends. It may depend on the size also. I'm mainly kind of focused on pens here. But kind of goes with anything. It'll give you a smoother transition. You're not going to I don't feel a bump or anything, which can happen depending on like I said, the density, the hardness of the different materials. Sometimes your standard cutters can kind of handle things. It'll give you a little bit easier time. But if you kind of screw up with one of these things, you get blowouts. It catches easier. So, not to say that they're particularly hard to use, but you do have to have a little bit more awareness, caution when you're using the standard cutters, I think, versus the negative rakes when you're dealing with resins, especially. So which lathe? Let's see here. Yeah, if you're gonna go with scrapers, you should go with carbide, because you don't have to mess around. You can just rotate or flop it out. Switch it out. Let's see. Which lathe did you guys recommend? Harbor Freight. One thing that if I could make a recommendation, the Harbor Freight's fine. If you're going to go on the cheaper end, though, if you're looking for a cheaper one thing that you can sacrifice, it kind of depends. You got to look at your budget and all that stuff. I think it helps if you can start with a budget, I would say. But what I would recommend is looking at the Rikon, like the cheapest Rikon models. I think that it's going to be a better lathe than the Harbor Freight in general. It's going to have better, the tailstock and things are going to kind of work a little bit better in general. I think that's what I've heard from most people. What you're going to give up is the variable speed. But I mean, I'm pretty sure that I don't know what the prices are. I shouldn't quote any prices, but the cheapest Rikon, you're going to have to change the belt for every speed. It's not, you don't have like a dial. So this is a really expensive lathe. So this is kind of a terrible example, but I have a dial and it's all totally variable speed, but I do have belts. I have a low belt and a high belt on this one. Now this is not a MIDI lathe, obviously, but let's go and look over. So the first one that I started on was the Comet. That is a mini lathe. They call it a MIDI, M-I-D-I, but that's BS. It's really a mini lathe. And this is the older model of Comet. But so in this thing, I have belts. So I had 3 belts to choose from. However, it does also have a variable speed dial. And so if you can afford a mini or MIDI lathe that has the variable speed dial, it's going to make your life so much better. For most things, you can just kind of leave it on one belt and you're fine, and just adjust. It can only go so far on each belt, position that you're on. It's going to go really slow on the low speed, and then you're going to have kind of a range in the middle, and then the high speed it'll have a range of high speeds. But it is nice to have variable speed. But if you're just looking to try things out and you're willing to just have a lathe, what the alternative is, there's no variable speed dial. It'll just come with like a belt, you know, like a thing, a belt thing, whatever you call this, with like 5 or so different speeds, you know, 5 or so different positions that you can put the belt on, and you can't adjust it. It's just going that, you know, whatever speed that belt's on. You don't have any variableness. That's a good way to go, but the Rikon I know is a super solid lathe. The question is, once you get past the, you know, once you get into that realm, then the next thing, the next level up is the variable speed, and that can, you know, sometimes that can kind of put you out of being able to afford it. But, you know, if you can get one of the Jets or the Rikon or even the Laguna, it depends on your budget, like I said. If you can step up to the variable speed Mini, I mean, those are pretty cush. They're really nice. So that's my 2 cents. If you're gonna go for cheap, I would recommend the Rikon with the belt change speeds. You're gonna get a little bit nicer lathe than the Harbor Freight in general, I think. All right, so we're getting closer here. And like I said, that's just my opinion. I'll tell you what, well, and here's another thing, actually. Let me give you actually another little piece of advice. If you could find a used, like the Jet, I think it was the 1226 or what, I don't know all the model numbers. But if you could find like the Jet variable speed or a Rikon variable speed for that's used, I mean, you could get a really nice lathe. You know, okay, so somebody owned it before you, but you could get a pretty nice piece of equipment for pretty cheap on the used market, I bet. Might want to, you know, take a peek at the Craigslist. Got a little pit type thing right there. I think I'm actually going to fill that right now. I could feel it when it was spinning on the lathe. And I think I'm better off just adding a little bit of CA glue real quick. It's just a tiny little, like, kind of pinhole that was in the middle of the wood, but if I fill it now, I don't have to fill it later. And I may turn it away, possibly, but without having to fill it, but I think I'll just put a little bit of CA glue down in there and not have to think about it. Here's another little kind of tip for trying to find equipment. If you have a local wood turning club, that's where, so you know, you can find stuff on Craigslist used. In some cases, you kind of might want to, you know, have a little bit of experience, know what you're looking for, what things you don't want to see, you know, in a used lathe. Things that might be, you know, red flags. If you can kind of get involved with a local turning club, typically you get really good deals. Like if somebody's upgrading their lathe and they're like, oh, I need to get rid of this old one, you know, I've been using this mini and I'm going to get a different one. That's where you get a smoking deal. Like you get an excellent lathe and you got it, you know, it's from someone that's taking care of it probably, or at least knows what's going on with it. All right, so bare minimum, there's CA glue kind of down in the bottom of that little pit, so I can probably kind of turn it. It's not perfectly flush, I don't think, but I still have material to take off. The cheapest Rikon is $5.29. I still think that the value in the Rikon is better. Like I said, it depends on your budget though. The Harbor Freight will work fine. The biggest thing is, actually let me stop real quick, because before you go and spend $279 on the Harbor Freight, I think there's actually two different cheap Harbor Freights, and one of them has a funky spindle, if I remember correctly. Things might have changed, I don't know, but make sure the spindle threads on that Harbor Freight are a 1 inch by 8 TPI thread, and it's not some weird thing. Make sure that it has a bare minimum of that, because if you ever wanted to use like the bottle stopper mandrel, and even some other things, just some things are not like standard on some of the cheapest things on the planet. Like I know especially the Wen, I'm pretty sure this falls into that category. There's cheap ones on Amazon that you got funky things going on with the spindle, all right? And so just double check and make sure, because if you're ever gonna use something like the mandrels, it won't work, a standard one, and you'll have to figure out some other weird way of doing stuff. So just double check. Or if you ever wanted to put chuck, you know, it's the same thing for chucks. Just make sure it's got a 1 inch by 8 TPI threaded mandrel and not some other weird kind of thing. All right, so everything's looking good so far. I'm being a little bit cautious here. I want to make sure we get through this without any hiccups. Oh, they got electronics issues. Oh no. Yeah, the Nova Comets, the new ones are really nice. Yeah, you're right. All the extra little, like, your tools and your bushings and chucks and all that stuff, especially if you get into the sharpening aspect of things, can get pretty expensive. Yeah. But what else are you gonna do with your money? Come on. Tools are great. Alright, that's looking pretty good there. A little bit more to take off, I think, on these ends. I'm at that point where I'm like, oh, one more pass, one more cut. I think I'm gonna not do that today, because I think it's looking pretty good. It's a little bulbous, but I kind of like it. I don't know. Let's get you guys in here. I typically do that. I don't usually go for like the straight-sided blanks. Try to get this thing to focus here. There we go. It's looking pretty good. A little bit of sandage. We got some really cool swirls going on in there. A little bit dark on this side, but I don't know, I like it. So this is the body, and then the other one, this guy's the cap. Still got a little bit to take off there. I'm going to be putting a CA finish on top of this, so you don't want, in some cases you can get pretty close to the bushing if all you're doing is just polishing the resin, but if you're going to put CA finish on, you're going to be adding more, you know, girth to the blank basically, and you want to make sure that you're definitely not protruding in any way above the, you know, where the component meets up. Lucy's here. How's it going? I'm going to do a little bit of work on this end here. And that's it. I'm calling it quits, guys. Let's do some sandage. Alright, so I think I'm going to sand the wood. I'm going to start at 240 and see how that goes. I'm really going to focus on the wood and then switch to the 400 and do, like, basically not sand 240 on this end. I don't really need to, I don't think. Sometimes the wood, it's a little harder, can handle a little bit more, you know. I'm just going to give it a little extra. Let's see here. Did I miss anything? use the grit the grit tool. The 80 grit smoother. Actually, I think feeling a little bit of a tool mark, so we're just going to sand the whole thing with 240. In fact, I'm going to get a new piece. Tool marks are a little harder to get out with like 400 grit. Yeah, in fact, I'm gonna go back over this so I can see that I'm low on that end. We got a little bit more work to do. I'm actually gonna pull out the negative rake square guy, and actually this thing's kind of dull. Let's see what we can do with this, just to kind of smooth things out a little bit. Yeah. Still got a little bit more to go. That's better. All right. Now we're good. It's a lot easier to take a quick cut, smoothing pass sometimes, and sit here and sand, tool marks out. So we're just going to give this guy a good sanding. All right, we'll wipe that off with some denatured alcohol. Just a little bit. And we'll move on to the 400 grit. Let's get a new piece of that too. I gotta stop and see what's going on in the chat here. Looks like there's a lot of people here. The grinder had him start wondering. Yeah, things do kind of plateau out, but I don't know. I mean, here's the funny thing. So, you know, between my dad and I, man, the amount of tools that we both have, like if I don't have it, he's got it typically, but even still, like, you know, okay, so I got a full shop of everything, and I mean, I'm even thinking about possibly buying another MIDI lathe to do some of the pen stuff on. This thing's pretty, the tailstock's kind of a pain in some cases to do the custom pens. But at the same time, I'm also thinking I might just go for a metal lathe. So I don't know. There's always another tool, you know? Always something else you can buy. Want a new bandsaw too? And if you like start diving down some kind of random rabbit hole, that's where things kind of get crazy. But if you can be disciplined, you know, kind of focus on what do you want to make. I think that's the biggest question, you know. Try and think about what types of things do you want to make. You can figure out what you really need for the most part. There's going to be extra stuff here and there, but figure out what you need to do the things that you want to make, and then try to, you know, put blinders on a little bit and stick with that, at least until you feel like you've, you know, fairly mastered it. I run into the problem where I'm like running in 5 different directions at once. I'm like, oh, I don't really know how to do this correctly yet, but I'm going to go and try this other thing. Buy every tool that you need for it. That's my problem. I like to collect tools. My other big problem is I tend to be like, oh, I might need this someday, but I really don't have plans to actually use it. That's where I run into problems. I would recommend, if you don't need it right now, like wait until you actually have a need for a tool and then buy it. That's where you run into like storing random tools that, you know, I got a lot of tools that I've bought and like I never used, honestly. I thought I might need it someday, and I either bought a different tool or just never did the thing that I was going to actually that I intended to do with it. All right, so we got it up to 400. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with a little bit of, I have this padded 500. I like to kind of do that just to kind of, mainly on the resin side, just to pull out any scratches that may be a little bit more persistent under there before I put the CA finish on. Sometimes those ones can kind of stand out if there's something a little deeper that you didn't really see. But you don't need to go super high. I know I've seen other, you know, some people where they're like polishing their blank up to, you know, thousands of grit and then putting a CA finish on, and that doesn't really accomplish much. In fact, that can actually be detrimental because that CA finish needs to have something to grab onto, you know, and so those scratch marks are what it can kind of grab onto. Now there, I see a little bit of a kind of a scratch there. I'm gonna pull that out. Do a little bit of work on that. If you want to get kind of crazy, you can get on put on some, you know, higher powered, like a, what am I trying to say? Like a magnifying kind of visor. If you really want to get kind of crazy with stuff, typically you can kind of see it just by eye, but just trying to take out any kind of deeper looking scratches. You want to have a consistent 500 grit scratch pattern on there before we put the finish on. 500, 600, 800, you know, whatever. You don't need to go over 1,000 before you put a CA finish on. Part of the thing is the CA glue is going to actually kind of embed into those grooves, and they're going to go away. They're going to disappear. But persistent scratches, like something that's kind of a little deeper, that's where you kind of can run into some problems. Okay, so CA finish time. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put this, I like to just douse it with this super fast thin. You can see it's like water thin. That'll kind of soak in a little bit, especially into the wood, if there's any little grooves or anything. That'll just kind of lay down a base for me. And then I'm gonna switch over to the mercury, which is what I use for my finishes. I like the thickness, the viscosity, the working time of it. A lot of things that go into why I like that one specifically. There's a lot of different options out there. Starbond's got quite a few, but it's like the timing and the viscosity. I can just get the mercury thin flex. I can get that on very smooth, and that's why I use it. Now another way you can go, if you're doing hybrids, another thing you can do is use like the pastes. That'll give your wood a little bit of like kind of that, it'll take on a little bit more of that amber tone because of the waxes and oils. But if you're gonna do that, you're not gonna wanna put a finish on top. It can kind of screw up your finishes. So that just kind of soaked in. You can already see it's looking pretty awesome. Looking pretty good. This blank doesn't have a bunch of like pits or anything this side. So I don't have to worry about that. We're gonna have to fill some of those cracks on the other one. It's gonna take a little bit of extra time to do that, but this one looks pretty solid. And I don't use the accelerator on that super fast thin. I wanna let it like kind of cure on its own and also have some time to kind of sink into the wood. The other thing is, I find that CA glue penetrates into wood and it'll kind of offer you that same kind of warmth. It warms up the wood a little bit anyway. So I don't use the pastes and stuff, but you could just do a paste, like a Yorkshire grit or something like that, and that's it. And then polish it up. What you're gonna find though is the reason I like to go, a main reason I like to go with the CA finish on a hybrid is you're gonna get an even gloss sheen over both sides. This Red Mallee burl, you could probably get it pretty polished up, but it's still just not gonna be glossy like resin. So I like to go for the hybrid, or for the CA finish on a hybrid, because I think it just looks, if you're gonna go for a glossy look, I want it to be glossy all the way across the blank. All right, so I missed a lot of the chat. You guys are chatting it away. No, you don't want to wet sand the wood, especially this. This wasn't stabilized. That's another reason why I want to put a CA finish on. It protects the wood. It's a really dense burl, so I'm not particularly worried about it. It's not like just slapping some walnut on there that's not stabilized, but I'd rather protect it a little bit more. But definitely I don't want to wet sand it because I don't want it to absorb that moisture. That's a good question. No, I don't do sanding sealer. You can use, the CA glue is going to act the same way. If you were doing like larger things, and even on those, I don't have a lot of experience even with like bowls and stuff. I know a lot of people do that, but I don't, it seems like an extra step to me because it's really just not much different than CA glue. It's still like it's like a lacquer. Usually those things are like a cellulose lacquer based thing that you're spraying on it. Well, CA glue is a plasticky, thing that you can put on the surface, and it'll fill. Because I think what you're doing with sanding sealers is filling grain, and so the CA glue is going to do that. I don't think the sanding sealer. I think the argument is that it sands better, but so does CA glue. It's hard and all that stuff. So I don't mess around with those things. I'd have to experiment a lot with like larger projects, bowls, hybrid bowls and things, to really see if that really makes a difference on those. Because I do know that a lot of people do that. I think it's not a bad idea, I guess, if you're not going to do anything else to kind of fill those kind of cracks and stuff. I think that it makes sense. But if you're going to put a top coat finish on top of a hybrid bowl, I'm not certain that, like, a lot of times that's what I'll do, is I'll just put an epoxy finish on a hybrid bowl using, like, you know, Alumilite's Amazing Clearcast Plus. And so in that case, I don't think the sanding sealer is doing anything. But if I was going to just go with a paste type thing, maybe, I don't know. Some of these things, just, you got to kind of look at what are the benefits, what is it doing, and how many steps do you actually need to get to the point that you want this thing to look. It's kind of similar, you know, there's some people that will micro mesh, you know, like let's say this was just a resin blank totally. They'll micro mesh all the way to the top level of micro mesh, which is like, I don't know what kind of grit, but it's like 15 million grit, and then go over to a buffing wheel and hit it with Tripoli. Well, that's like dropping it's like abrading it at like 1,000 grit. So why would you waste the time polishing that thing? And it's not exactly the same as the sanding sealer, but it's similar. You know, you got to look at the processes and kind of see, and I just haven't seen a use for the sanding sealer in my typical steps. I think it's just added steps basically for me. But I also admit that I haven't messed around with it much. I've done it like once or twice. Didn't really see the point on those couple times that I did it, you know. So I haven't done it again. I like to go, I need to find, you know, I think we're all looking for the fastest way to get it to look, you know, how you want. And cheapest in some cases. All right, so this is just 400 grit. I'm just knocking down ridges. It's pretty much impossible to, you know, apply CA glue with a paper towel or anything and get it dead smooth. So first I'm going to hit it with that 400 grit just to get everything smoothed out for the, you know, for the most part. And then we're just going to switch up to I can turn off the dust collector. I love that part. And then we'll switch on to the polishing papers. I'm going to switch out this, let's see here, how can I do this? Yeah, I think I'm going to switch out. I've been using my ShamWow to cover the bedways on the lathe for when I'm doing tapping and all that stuff, drilling. And so it's got like a bunch of oil junk on it. We're going to get a brand new ShamWow. I totally, just as a joke, bought a bunch of ShamWows. I found them online. So, I still have new ones. I don't even know if they still sell them. The light is falling down on me here, so I got to tighten that thing up. Hold on a minute. So weird, that light tends to droop over time. Oh, it's actually the top one. Oh, that's too much. Okay. Now my light's not going to collapse on me. The number one hollower is one of my favorite tools. I love that one. If you're just getting into pen turning, the Easy Start tools from Easy Wood Tools, I don't know if that's what you guys were talking about. Those things are pretty darn, I mean, it's just a metal bar with a wooden handle. It just doesn't have like the little step, which I find relatively unnecessary. Really. It's just, I think it's basically, this is cut off. But those may be a little bit longer than this one. This is like the mini size. But the Easy Start, I think it's a little bit cheaper, and I think you can even get like the set for like a deal. That's a pretty good way to go for carbides. You get the detailer, you get the round and the square. All right, I'm gonna wipe this off because I hit it with some 400 grit. I just don't want that 400. If there are any little 400 grit particles from the sandpaper on there, I don't want to be sanding that in again. So this is the Zona paper. It's a polishing paper, very thin. I like it. It gives me good feedback. I know how much pressure I'm applying. And I get this stuff at Turner's Warehouse. This is somewhere probably around the 750 grit or so, something like that range. It's a little bit of a step up from 400. You want to give this a couple extra seconds of sanding between the 400. You could go up to you could step up and do like 400 then 600 also if you wanted. Some people just start with this after applying a CA finish. So experiment. Again, I think that most of us don't really like sanding. So whatever way, sometimes it's worth like, oh, do I really need to hit this with the 400 first? Can I just start with the 750 or whatever? Try it out. See what happens. Worst case scenario, you have to drop back down and, do a little bit more sanding if you see scratches at the end. But I find it worth it to kind of play around with experimenting, like I said. See what is actually necessary to get the results that you're looking for. All right, I'm going to wipe this off. I'm actually going to pop this off the lathe right now. What happens is I applied CA finish, and there's probably a little bit of CA kind of overlapping from between the blank and the bushings. So I'd rather kind of crack that right now. I'd rather get it loose, get the blank loose from those bushings now before I've like totally polished it and it's all perfect. Because I'm gonna, you could crack the finish by doing what I'm about to do, and I'd rather do that now before I've spent more time on this. And I just tap it on my tailstock, and they usually pull out. I don't know if there's a lot of CA glue built up. I don't put tons of coats of CA on. But what I'm going to do here is there's probably a few little chips kind of hanging off the edge. So this is the only reason I have pen mandrels. I use my pen mandrel to square up and clean up any extra CA glue that might be kind of hanging off the end there. Because you want to get that out of there before you assemble it, because then you can really crack the finish if there is a chunk of CA hanging off the end and you press that onto the part, then it'll crack your finish, and that's the worst. Totally avoidable too. So just take a minute, find something that has, you can reference your blank. One thing you could use, I find this to be the best if you have a pen mandrel like this that's got a square edge. But you could maybe kind of rig up something using just your, like the taps, what are these, the punches. I mean, this is way small, but this is, you get the punch set. You can maybe rig something up on one of those. Find something that you can do, reference that on. I'm trying to think, does anybody have any other ideas of something similar if you don't have something like this that you could do that same thing with? This is actually a pen mandrel for a shopsmith also, so it's a little bit different shape and everything, but it works perfect for this. All right, let's get back in here. Now, I want to make sure, the other thing is if you're going to put your blank back on, you got to make sure that there's no CA glue hanging off on your bushings as well. So I just take my thumb and just make sure that that's clean on each one before I put them back on. I don't really think there's a lot of buildup here, but Never know. Again, when you put it on and then put it between centers, you could crack that finish again. Where'd the blank go? Oh, I lost the blank. There it is. One other thing that I think I'm actually going to do, I'll show you a little kind of a tip trick kind of thing. I'm going to put on, let's see here. Yeah, I think I'm just going to use the finish. I'm using the Mercury Thin Flex. I'm going to put a little dot on here. And what I want to do is I want to seal up. Oh shoot, I sanded through the finish on this. Did I? It looks like I did. Well, what I was going to show you is I like to seal up the ends of the wood just so moisture doesn't get it'll just kind of seal things up so it doesn't suck in a bunch of moisture. You don't need a lot, I don't think, but just to kind of seal up that end. You definitely don't want to put a big chunk of it on. I think I might need to put some more. Yeah. I might have sanded through. Stopped a little bit early. I was getting excited, guys. We need to put some more finish on this thing, though. Oops. Get in the hole. Yeah. Sanded through it. All right, we're going back to the finish. I think I got a little aggressive with the 400 grit. You don't need to sand very hard when you're knocking down those ridges, and I was kind of going to town a little bit, I think. Phillips screwdriver, that's not a bad idea. All right, so let's add a few more coats of finish. It looks like I sanded through on this end. We don't want that. I wasn't really paying attention to how many coats I was putting on, so somewhere between 4 and 8 is usually plenty for me with this Thin Flex. And the Thin Flex from Mercury is meant to be used with the accelerator. The Flex, this is meant to be a finish, and the Flex, because it's a finish, it's meant to be applied and have some working time. It doesn't just set up on you right away, so it needs a little help with the accelerator to start curing. So it's actually intended to be used with that for the proper curing. And for my CA finish, I don't mess around with it. I just kind of get on, get off, and get out of there, I find that's the best way for me to get the smoothest finish. And also, so they also have a medium flex. I know a lot of people like to use medium viscosity finishes, or CA glues for their finishes. They also have a medium flex. I don't know. All of these things are different. So medium this medium flex may be a little bit different than if you're used to using like Starbond medium, it may not exactly be the same thickness and all that. And that's where you might want to kind of play around with things. I don't necessarily recommend. I mean, I'd recommend this if this works for you, but you might need to kind of try a few different products before you find the one that kind of works for the way that you do your finishes, let's say. Because I used the other ones in the past and I got not particularly great results. And then I kind of found this one and other ones similar to it that had similar viscosity. And I kind of found myself able to do a CA finish a lot better. It had to do with the viscosity, the working time, all those types of factors. Maybe I didn't sand through it. It might have just been the wood. I don't know. No harm in putting some more CA glue on. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't actively like try to market and sell pens. I've never been good at like trying to sell pens, so I just kind of don't care to spend the time to do that. You know, if you see something I make, now this pen is going to Kid Cooper. This one's already claimed, but you know, if you see something that I make, you know, and you're like, I want that, you know, just shoot me a message. Just ask, shoot me an email, or hit me up on Instagram. A lot of times I just kind of keep things, because like my main thing is blank making. And so a lot of times I'm making pens to see what the blanks look like, because we do, you know, we're experimenting with new things a lot. And so, you know, I'll make a pen. One, it gets me turning, because otherwise I would just be making blanks all day, and that's not so much fun. I like to make things as well. But my focus isn't to make something to sell a lot of times. It's like to see what the blank looks like that we made. So I make things, and a lot of times I'll just kind of keep them in the shop so I have like a reference. But if you see something you like, yeah, you can. I'm always willing to, in most cases, willing to sell whatever I make. Okay, let's try this again without sanding through the finish. How about that? I'm going to turn the dust collector back on. Brian Woodward's asking, thinking about buying an SLA printer. Do I have a resin that I recommend? I've been using, so I have the Elegoo. I got an Elegoo Saturn and an Elegoo Mars 2 Pro. I prefer the Saturn in most cases, but I like the smaller, I know this is the printer, you're not really asking about that, but I kind of prefer the Saturn. It just tends to be more accurate, more consistent. But for the resins that I'm using, let me go get one. I'm trying to go find one. I'm using the Elegoo ABS-like. I'm finding that stuff works really well. I did like their water washable, but that's kind of, you got to be a little bit kind of careful. There's tons, and I haven't really tried a lot. What I like about this is it's not super thick. They got a lot of different options, but the ABS-like, and I would say, I would recommend probably in most cases going for, because most brands have an ABS-like or something similar to it. It's just a little bit more, a little less brittle, and that seems to turn excellent. The water washable was pretty good. I had a couple of them that were a little bit brittle, and that could have possibly been how much I cured them or whatever. But you can get them. So here's an example. There's some pretty, all the white spots in this were that are the 3D printing resin. And I don't think I put a CA finish on this, did I? No. And so you can see, like, it turned extremely well. There was no chip outs or, you know, brittleness to it, and it polishes up extremely well also. So that, like I said, there's no CA finish on top of that. That's just the 3D resin. All the white spots are just polished up. And so I found that it prints pretty well. I haven't really had any problems with it, other than mostly my own errors, you know. Just trying to dial in settings kind of thing. So it prints pretty well, and it turns well. I think a good brand is Soraya Tech. A lot of people really like that. What I don't like is the standard resins. Those things are a lot of times really thick, and it's just a pain to clean up, and if it's cooler in your shop, it's not going to print as well, I find. But I haven't really, like I said, I haven't really tried a lot of different resins. But partly because I've just gotten, you know, pretty reasonable results using that ABS like from Elegoo. Okay, I think that's pretty good. This time, hopefully I won't sand through. Like I said, I typically don't put a lot of coats of CA glue on, so I have to kind of balance. If you're not going to load up a lot, you really have to kind of balance how much sanding you do. So you got to get that finish on pretty smooth because you don't have a lot to take off. And I think that might be why some people kind of prefer using the what was I saying? Prefer using the medium, because it seems like you can build up more thickness, kind of more coats with less coats, or basically compared to a thin. But I would kind of prefer putting more thin coats on. And like I said, I try to balance, like, getting it on. I can get the thin on so much smoother than medium that I would generally just sand it all off anyway. The extra. It's kind of, I don't know, like I said, you kind of, with CA finishes, you just got to figure out which way works for you consistently, the most consistent, and gives you the best results. Because there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just whichever is best for you. All right, I'm gonna wipe this off and just, again, take another look at it. Just make sure that I'm not seeing anything that doesn't look right before we move on. Should probably do that step of popping off the bushings again. Clean that up a little bit. It's always worth it. If you see a problem, just stop and deal with it, you know, and redo it. It's only going to take a few more minutes to get back to where you were, but if you let something go, then a lot of times you're even less happy at the end, you know. And I'm going to reapply some CA to the end of this, since I'm kind of sanding this off on the wood to kind of seal that up. I'm just cleaning off the edges of these bushings just to make sure there's nothing kind of hanging out. Kim's back. How's it going? Yeah, time is always against us. I know. Wish I had more time too. I wish I didn't have to commute to my shop. That's what I really wish. That's the biggest thing on my list. I want to have a house with a shop on site in some way or another. Okay, so we're gonna move on. We did the first step was about 750. It's the green one from Zona. Moving on to the gray. That's somewhere probably in the like 1,000, 1,100 grit equivalent, something like that. They label it as microns, and it's kind of, I tried to look up and see, you know, if I could find other sandpaper manufacturers, like what micron level are they claiming their, you know, certain sandpaper is. And I kind of put together a list. So the green is somewhere around 700. The gray is 1,350. And then the blue is the next one I'm going to go for, is 2500. I don't know if that's really, I think it's in general, it's somewhere in that range, you know. But I don't know if that's, you know, exact, let's say. Okay, that should be pretty good. And I do recommend doing this kind of cross grain, you know, letting it, you're putting radial scratches around the edges while it's spinning, while the lathe's on. But I do recommend doing this kind of what I call cross grain scratches. I just think that you get more consistent results. If you think about it, we've just laid down a bunch of lines, right? Like grooves in that pen. But what can happen is it's hard to explain, but you know, there's little grit particles in there, and you can kind of end up getting into the same trenches, let's say. So by doing this, you know, crosshatch, you're definitely covering everything by doing it this way, I think, and it's creating little squares, you know, lined. Like a grid of scratches rather than just kind of a bunch of swirly ones. So I just think it works better. It'll give you a little bit better consistency usually. And in general, in the end, it's going to give you probably better results, I think. So definitely kind of recommend doing that on plastics. Even with wood, because a lot of times your wood grain's going, you know, the other direction. And so you want to, if it's just wood, you want to sand, you know, whatever the final sanding is, you know, your final grit, you want to make sure that you sand with the grain as the final thing. You don't want your scratch marks going across the grain of the wood. I don't know if there's really wood grain on this. Burls don't really have the same type of thing as like grain. Usually the grain is kind of like a big jumble of bird's nest on burls, but you know. Yeah, I want to step out of my kitchen into my workshop, exactly. Some days I want my kitchen to be my workshop so I can eat and work. Yeah, it just, you know, it's not that big of a deal, but I'm like, man, for what I do, I mean, this is the type of thing that you pop into the garage and do, honestly. You know, it's kind of, that's how it used to be. That's how my workshop was when I lived in Vegas. And it was just so nice. Now, at the same time, it's also kind of a double-edged sword because then you can end up spending more time, especially if it's like a business like this. Sometimes it's hard to walk away and do the family things and other stuff. But driving 30 minutes each day is just such a, well, each way. So an hour I lose every day. So like 7 hours a week. That's like a full day of work that I'm just sitting in the truck. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So someday, if the real estate market ever actually does fall apart, we might be able to buy a house. They keep talking about it. I haven't seen anything yet, though. Prices have slightly gone down here, but the interest rates went so far up that it still costs way more than it used to. Come on, guys, work with me. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is hit it with some magic juice polish. And this is like a plastic polish, liquid kind of deal. And I like to use these shop towels. They feel a little bit less abrasive. If you're going to be polishing something to a high polish, you don't want to be using something super scratchy to apply it with. But just be careful, you know, I really recommend not using rags of any sort because they can get wrapped up on the lathe and injure you. So, you know, so far these blue paper towels seem to be the kind of best way to go. Okay, so this is 6 steps. I know it sounds like a lot kind of, but it really isn't. It takes a few seconds each one. Just get it on the paper, rub it around a little bit, clean it off. And it's just that easy. And it works great. So there's step 1. I like to shake them. I don't really know. Yeah, travel, it's just kind of ridiculous. It's funny because I lived in Vegas, which is a lot bigger town than where I live now. And I have a way longer commute to work. You know, it's just one of those things that just irks me a little bit. And I'm like, But I can't complain because I don't pay rent at my shop. Because it's my dad's shop and he let me just move in. So, I mean, there's upsides, but that time lost, I'm just like, man, really? You know? Don't like the time lost. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3. And you don't want to press really hard or anything like that. This isn't like a friction polish. It's just, you want to kind of let the polish itself, you know, it's abrasive, very fine abrasive, but it's an abrasive and you just want to let it do the work. Don't need a lot of pressure. They claim, I don't know, a lot of people say to run your lathe at like, and the directions say to go like around 2,000 RPMs. I find that I get good results at like 1,500 or, you know, somewhere between like 15 and 1,700. It's plenty. Otherwise, it just seems like it kind of heats up quick, and it's, I don't know. So that's how I use it. That may not be the right way to do it, but it seems to work for me. Over 7%, I know. It's ridiculous. And the problem is where I live, the prices have just skyrocketed. There's like there's no inventory here, and it's high demand in like the kind of like, I don't live in Lake Tahoe, but it's like the Lake Tahoe area. And so a lot of people moved, you know, came over here during COVID because they could, you know, they were in like the Silicon Valley area. And they didn't have to come to work anymore. So they all bought houses in the valleys around Tahoe here and a lot of other places. We're not unique, but you know, a lot of the kind of mountain towns are high prices. Now I finished with 5 and 6. This is what I've gotten to the point with. 5 and 6 I switched to this it's like a I don't know, what do you call it? Like a microfiber kind of sort of towel that will rip. It will tear. Where did I put the package? I forget what they call this stuff. Scrub It. Scrub It is the name of this stuff. Just reusable wipes. You should probably be able to find them in your like, you know, Target or Walmart or your grocery store in the like cleaning aisle. And I think it's a little bit less abrasive than even the blue paper towels. I don't know. I still haven't figured it out, but this is how I do it. And I feel like it's relatively safe. I don't really feel like it's going to get wrapped up on the thing, and if it does, it'll kind of rip. Now, you got to kind of watch out. It is kind of hard, but I think it'll rip before it's going to rip my finger off. Just be careful if you're using anything that, you know, is not just like a paper towel. All right, so number 5. Baseball season started up, guys. Oh man. So that's exciting. We like baseball. Made a bunch of changes to rules this year that are kind of interesting. So the pitchers have a pitch clock now, which is kind of weird, and so do the batters technically. So the pace of the game is a little bit faster, which is kind of cool. I don't know. It should limit how long games go, which is good. Baseball games can kind of get a little bit ridiculous. But either way, we're enjoying watching. Oh. Kind of wrecked that thing. All right, so number 6, final step. We're getting there. Whew. $140K. Oh man. I wish. I mean, for the type of property that I'm looking at that has a little bit of land, you know, like a shop building and a like a small house. I mean, there's no way we would get anything right now, especially like under 500. And I'm not even, it ain't even nice. Like these are maybe 400 maybe, but they're not, I mean, I don't know that I would call it like move-in ready, you know, or not souped up. It's going to be kind of old and needing repairs. Ooh, that is looking pretty sweet, guys. So we're just waiting for the actual crash that they keep talking about. Look at that. Woo-wee. Oh man. That is looking pretty cool. All right, let me back up. I'm going to pop it off the lathe and kind of hold it up for you guys. A little bit here. Ooh. Digging that. Oh, the camera's shaking there. Sorry about that. And find an angle where you can see it, and it's hard because it's so glossy. Sweet. All right. Let's move on to the cap. Oh, I almost dropped the bushing. All right. A little bit more wood in this one. And like I said, this one's got some cracks and things going on. That's not really a crack that I can feel, but some of these areas, there's definitely cracks that I can feel. There's one right there for sure. Up on this side, those are cracks that kind of need to be filled. Now, I did do a little bit of work. I kind of dumped some CA after I had drilled it out before I glued the tube in, but I can feel right here. So before we even begin, I'm just going to actually hit it with some CA glue, the thin stuff. Let it kind of soak in there, and just try to kind of fill some of those holes before we even start turning it. I don't think it's really going to like come apart necessarily or anything, but I'd feel a little bit more comfortable if there weren't cracks in it when I start turning, you know what I mean? So I'm actually just going to put this one down. It's pretty nasty. I'm just going to kind of dump some of this. Are you guys on? Let's make sure that we're looking at this thing here. It's kind of spraying on the other sides. This side is where the like kind of the bigger crack is. So I want to let that kind of seep in. I'm sure some of the spray might have got on top of there, but we're just going to let it kind of sit there and soak in for a second. Oh, you tried using, yeah, rags, man. You got to watch your hair, you know, long sleeves, anything that's loose. Jewelry, man. I mean, it just, and it sneaks up on you and it happens so quick, you know. Always watch out with that stuff. Yeah, the property taxes too. Yep. That's why we've been renting forever. It's really annoying. When we moved up here, we had $0. We had no money. And I knew that, you know, that was like 2012. That was like exactly when we needed to buy, and I knew that. And I tried borrowing, you know, stealing to try and get ourselves into a house at that time, and it just, there's no way. So we missed our spot. So I'm hoping that now we're like ready, as long as the market will just like, mainly like the values, like the prices, because we actually have a decent amount of money saved. You know, so if you know, interest rates are high, but if we can put enough down, then our, you know, the payment still comes down that way. But I mean, prices are just way too high still. Who knows? Who knows? I'm gonna have to move to Alaska or something. I don't know. Where's it cheap? Somewhere that's cheap. And that's if we want to live in, you know, somewhere where there's actually, you know, civilization. There are places in Nevada that are cheaper, but we'd be like 2 hours from a grocery store. Okay, let's turn this one up. Got a drink. We're ready to rock and roll here, I think. I'm gonna hit the dust collector. Put my safety glasses on. Get this thing kind of closer there. Make sure that we got this thing tight. Looks good. All right, things are looking good here. How's our crackage doing? Not too bad. I may come back and kind of fill, if any of these kind of cracks are, you know, apparently not filled. I may come back in and fill them. Bit of a crack there, and you know, this is not like a defect. This is how some of these burls like this, they're all going to have this kind of thing. There's just little stress fractures. It's such a really dense hardwood that, you know, it's just kind of a typical thing. There's a lot of stresses going on in it. So you just got to know about it and then, you know, deal with it by just kind of filling it, you know, when you get there. Looks like some of that CA glue isn't cured. It's way down in there. So I'm gonna hit it with some accelerator here. Make sure that stuff deep in there. I was noticing that I was getting some kind of a buildup on my cutter. It's CA glue. We should be good. I'm going to wait just a second before I come back and fill those holes. All right, man, this is looking good. I love this piece with all these different colors, darker and the lighter. Got some kind of weird green cathedrals going on in there. Looking pretty good. So I think at this point I'm going to do another application of just a kind of thin application of CA glue. I'm going to really blow that out good. I don't want dust in there when I'm applying it. We're just going to kind of douse the blank real quick. Again with the super thin. And just let that kind of soak in wherever it likes to go. Move to the UK and build in your field? Heck yeah. Actually, that's one thing that I would like to do is just build my own house also. But, I mean, with all the construction loans and land out here is ridiculous even. So, not a lot of options. I don't think my parents would like it if I moved to the UK. They'd be like, "You're supposed to help us out. What are you doing?" Plus, we really love it around here. It's exactly where we want to live. It's just so expensive, unfortunately. So I don't know. I'm keeping a positive attitude though, watching the market, seeing what's going on. I don't think that we've actually felt people have been talking about like weakening economy and this and that, recessions, but that the real estate market is slow to react. So I don't think we've actually seen, oh, whoops, that's the wrong, what am I doing? Trying to clean off my tool here. All that stuff sets up. You know, sitting there talking, thinking about real estate, and I started applying CA glue to my tool instead of acetone. That doesn't work. Okay. Here we go. Acetone, for anybody that doesn't know, acetone will clean up CA glue, which is also something that you need to be aware of. You know, CA glue is a good finish. It's very durable, but its weakness is acetone. So make sure that you don't accidentally get any, you know, nail polish remover or acetone on your pen. That's the one thing it's not going to do good with. But I think it's CA glue is probably the most durable finish out there. That's, you know, I really, even comparing to most of your like other finishes, I think it's extremely durable in comparison to pretty much everything. The only thing I would say that could possibly be reasonable to apply to pens, but it's going to take longer, is UV finish. That stuff is also chemical resistant, and I think it might be a little bit more durable, but I find that it's a lot harder. You're going to do a lot more work trying to get it applied and smoothed out and everything. I think CA finishes just go on so much faster that I don't really see the point, and they're like 80% or 85% as durable as the next thing out there, you know. So CA is a good one. Okay, let's keep this. Let me stop and look at this thing. How did we do? Still got a little bit of a crack there. I think I'm going to apply a little bit more. I'm going to move to this medium thick from Starbond. It's just a little bit thicker. It should fill a little bit better, let's say. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a glove on. The paper towel absorbs this stuff, and that's fine with me. I know that it's doing that, you know, even when I'm doing a finish. But if you don't want it to absorb, but want to kind of push it into surfaces, put a glove on, and you can kind of work it into crevices a little bit easier, and even, you know, spin the lathe. And it kind of makes for a quicker gap filling method, I find. Just a little bit. Turn that back on. We're going to hit it with some spray. Let's see what we did here. How are we looking? I still have quite a bit of material to take off, but I'd rather just try and fill this thing up for the most part now, and then it, you know, I can turn it back. So I think we're good now. Let's see where let's get some more material off of here and then see where we're at. Yeah, lacquers are still going to be, well, some of them may not be resistant. Some of them may be resistant to lacquer thinner and some other chemicals, but some lacquers, like I want to say like your spray lacquer stuff, like the Deft, I don't think that it's resistant to like lacquer thinner. Probably resistant to acetone though, I'm thinking. But you're kind of splitting hairs, you know, like that's the thing is CA finishes are plenty durable enough for a pen. I don't have any that I'm like, oh man, I really wish I would have used a better finish. You know, the finishes hold up better than the plating on kits a lot of times. Well, the cheaper kits, I should say. All right. Well, that crack's peeking out again at us. Just making sure. I want to see where the cracks are. This one's a pretty big one right here. Looks like I didn't do a very good job of getting it actually filled. Or maybe I might have popped it out. We are gonna need, it's that basically, that crack goes all the way down to the tube. So, luckily I used the black tube on this. And now I'm pulling out the thick, and we're just gonna kind of pack it in there, because now I'm pretty close to the final, you know, the final thickness. The thick has a really long working time, so that's good. But again, I'm gonna get gloves on, and we're gonna kind of push that down in there. Trying to be ahead of the game, but it didn't seem like it really did anything. I don't know. Craft foam, yeah, craft foam, people use that. Anything that's like kind of a non-stick. Some people just use the baggies for their pen kit parts. Put it on your finger. I didn't like that because it was all weird. It just felt weird. I didn't have a tactile feel for what I was doing, so I couldn't get it on smooth enough to make it worth my effort. Not an even distribution of suffering. I love it. Oh man. That's one way to put it. All right, I'm gonna do one more little blob, and I think I got this thing filled. Like I said, what I might have done was actually, because I did do work on this obviously already, but I may have actually undone, like it may have popped out when I was turning the stuff that I had already laid down in there. And so realistically, the best thing to do is let this, if you're going to apply some CA glue, walk away for like 20 minutes. That's going to be better, but obviously we're doing a live stream. I don't want to walk away for 20 minutes on this. Same thing with finishes too. You'll probably get a better polish and better results sanding if you put the finish on and like let it sit for like 20 or 30 minutes. It'll harden up a little bit more and probably sand and polish a little better. It would be like, ideal, let's say. It would be more ideal. It works fine. I mean, I get perfectly fine results making, sanding right after on the streams, but I think that if I would wait, it would probably be easier to get it nice and polished up and get possibly even better results. Okay, let's turn. Let's get this thing turned up. All right, we're pretty close there, I think. Might have to take a little bit more down on the ends. Yeah, just a little bit more there. That one's pretty close. I think I'll take another pass. And we got this thing, that's filled. Still got a little, I can feel a little bit down here that needs to be filled right there. Very small gaps now. Maybe right there. Nope, that one's good. So just a little bit of a nibble off the ends here. There we go. Yeah. I think that's good. Maybe a little bit more on this side. I think that's good. Now, like I said, I got to do a little bit more filling. And I think I'm just gonna, I tend to find the thick just kind of works best for me. And then just thicker, you know, to fill little gaps. I can just kind of put a blob on, push it down in there, and we're good to go. So I got one, a little bit right there. I'm gonna blow it out just to make sure there's no dust. Oh, good. One right there. I think just a couple little spots, and they're pretty minor little kind of pinholes going on that are left. All right, I'm gonna take kind of a very light pass with the tool just to kind of clean up the globs that I left on there. Not really trying to take off much material or anything. Just kind of clean up the CA glue. I think that's, I'll take the glove off. I got some fingernails. I gotta cut my nails. All right, we got that one good. We're good. We got those things filled up. Okay, so let's do a little bit of sanding. 240 grit. We're on a roll, guys. We're looking good. Let's see. Sorry, I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat too well. Just trying to get all the tool marks out, get this blank nice and smooth, and then we just basically are, you know, the rest of the sanding is just taking out, making the scratches finer and finer and finer. All right, so that's looking good. And again, like I said, doing the cross grain scratches. Move up to the 400 grit. I lost my, oh there it is. Nope, I found it. We're gonna get a new piece. Move up to 400. I'm gonna clean it off with a little denatured alcohol. Make sure you don't clean off, if you're filling little gaps with CA glue, little pinholes or whatever, make sure you don't accidentally reach for acetone to clean off the sanding dust, because that'll melt your CA glue. Another advantage to doing, like I was saying, the kind of cross grain with the lathe off sanding along the length of the blank. The other advantage is, and again, it's not such a big deal necessarily like with wood, but when you're dealing with resins, they're notoriously difficult. You gotta get as many of the scratches out as possible. Same thing goes with like a CA finish, which is also kind of a plastic. But by doing the lengthwise scratches, then I'm moving on to the 400 grit now, and the scratches are going around the blank when I start, and so you know that you've gotten all of the 240 grit scratches out when there are no lengthwise scratches that you can see, so it kind of gives you, I think it also just sands better. I think it's giving you a better, more consistent results in general, but it also gives you kind of a guideline to tell you when you're done sanding, when you've gotten that previous grit scratches out. So again, we're going to put a CA finish on top, so we don't have to go, hog wild sanding, but you don't want to put a bunch of deep scratches in your resin, because they will kind of show up in your, under the CA finish. So it's kind of a delicate balance. You don't want to go too high, but you also don't want to leave it too low. So we're going to go 400, then 500 with a soft pad, and just make sure there's no kind of deeper looking scratches that are standing out on the resin part. And you don't want to be pressing hard when you're doing your sanding. You shouldn't have to. Let the sandpaper do the work. And if you're not getting it flat, then move down to a lower grit. But you don't need to apply a bunch of pressure. That's going to do the opposite of what you want. All right, let me So this is a 500 grit pad. It's padded, so it's even less pressure. I'm just going to kind of give it a little buff. I think that's good. And then we're going to wipe it off with some alcohol. And it's time to finish. Whew. I can't wait to put this thing together. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is hit it with the super thin just to let it kind of soak into the wood. If there are any like micro fissures in it, it'll kind of seal that stuff up and be good to go. And then we'll move on to what I call my finishing CA glue. Everybody's got their own thing. I think if you ask 10 wood turners, pen turners, whatever, how they do CA, you're probably going to get 8.5 different ones, different ways of doing it. And I'm not going to use accelerator on this. I want it to soak in and dry on its own. Where's my scissors? I don't know. So I think everybody, I don't care if you make pens or whatever, I think that everybody should have this super fast thin because it's so useful. It's kind of like your standard, just your CA glue, super glue, but very thin. It'll kind of, harden up fibers if you're just a woodworker, penetrate into things. It's a good one. Okay, it looks like it's dry. So again, then we're going to switch to the Thin Flex by Mercury adhesives. Another one that's very similar to this is the Bob Smith, BSI, Bob Smith Industries. Their gold, what the heck is that one called? Super Gold Plus or something like that. It's like, it also has like it's not as smelly. It's like odorless, I want to say. That stuff has a very similar viscosity to this. And it's a pretty good one for finishing pens also, along the same lines. I do think Turner's Warehouse carries that one as well. So if you want to try something else that's a little different, Starbond's got some excellent, like their whole product line is good. Those are like kind of the three, that like if somebody wanted me to recommend a CA glue, those are probably the three that I would tell them to look at first, at least. Some people have had issues with the stick fast. It feels like that was many years ago now, so I don't know, but that stuff can be a little bit more on the aggressive side. It can kind of cure faster, it seems like. Oh man, that's looking good. Okay, 1 coat. Number 2. I'm gonna count this time. I think we're gonna go for like 6 or 7 coats. Something like that. Yeah, most people, I don't know. I never had a problem with stick fast exactly, but I didn't really like the viscosity. I would say that it, compared to the BSI, because that's what I went to next, and the Mercury, it felt like it was more clear. So like I said, I never had any problems. Some people have had problems with like cracking and, you know, I don't know. I don't know that that's the CA glue. I would pin that on wood movement or things happening underneath, you know, the CA finish. I don't know. But I kind of preferred these other ones more, because that's what I started using, you know, in the beginning. That was kind of one of the only ones that I knew of. Another one is, what was the other one? Easy something? That one seems okay. I don't know. Just kind of, you know, pick and choose, find one that's, I think what's more important is like the viscosity and how long it's, you know, before it hardens. Those types of things seem like the factors that will affect how well you can put a finish on. In my opinion, anyway. Oh, you've had the shattering thing? Yeah. I don't know. One thing I will say, you know, I live in a dry climate, and so it seems like everybody that had that lives in a humid climate. I don't know how that factors in. I do know that sometimes, you know, it'll kind of crackle and get cloudy when you apply it, and I do think that is a humidity issue. So I don't know. More people than not, like I haven't heard anyone that recommends using stick fast for CA finishes, but I have heard a whole lot of people that don't recommend it, you know, have had problems. So I don't know. But I never did personally see like an actual problem with the product. I just found others that I liked better. I have no clue how many coats I've put on at this point. Just thinking about stick fast. Hey, what's up, Dave? We'll put on like, I don't know, 1 or 2 more coats here. Make sure I don't sand through. I can't believe I sanded through on that last one. It seemed a little bit ridiculous. What I'm doing is just kind of lightly touching it to see if it's dried. It's better than like trying to like stop it and stick your fingerprint in it, you know. And like I said before, I'm doing this pretty quick. You might want to, you know, between coats you can let it sit a little longer if you wanted, but I do think that you're going to get probably an easier time of finishing and, you know, sanding and polishing if you wait a little bit before you know, when you're done with the finish, let it sit for like maybe 30 minutes, and I think you're going to get a better finish, you know, when you go to sand and polish it. Because it'll harden up a little bit more, and it'll just sand a little bit easier. I don't need the banjo. All right, but not a big deal. So first thing, I'm going to go back to the 400 grit, and see, I can tell it's a little bit soft, you know, like even just kind of hitting it with a little bit of water even can sometimes help out. But finishes do better when they're harder when you sand them. Oh, that went on pretty, I did pretty good. It's pretty smooth. Not too shabby. All right, I think that's good. We're gonna switch over to the wet sanding, and I can turn the dust collector off. That's the best part. And I think I'm gonna pull out some new papers. Definitely don't hang on to your sandpapers when you're doing finishes. If it feels like it's kind of starting to, you know, not work as well, then just toss it, get a new piece. Sandpaper is just too cheap to, especially when you're cutting it into these little tiny squares. If you're doing the, you know, for pens, just, you know, get a fresh piece. Don't hold on to it. You're not doing anybody any favors. You're not doing yourself any favors, that's for sure. Oh, box store, see, yeah. Definitely there are some that are better. And there's like different formulas, you know. I mean, even within the Star Bond line, they have some that are made for finishing. And if you're going to use it for finishes, I would go for that. They're going to be a little bit more flexible. That's the whole point. That's why this is called Thin Flex, the one that I use. Because it has a little bit of give. Not only like if you, let's say, dropped the pen, you know, or you know, maybe not like fully dropped it on the floor from standing, but you know, if it cracked, you know, kind of rolled or fell off the table, a more flexible finish will like dent in a sense more than just crack. And so the other problem is, you know, we're doing pens and sometimes we got wood in there. You know, again, this is one where all I did was dry this out. Now I don't think it's going to move a lot because it's a super dense hardwood. You know, these Red Mallee burl, it's super dense, and so I just don't think it's gonna really move a lot on me. But you know, it could pick up some moisture, and wood moves, and then it'll crack your finish. Some finishes just maybe suck, and they just crack anyway. You know, like that stick fast stuff. Maybe there's just a problem with it over time. I don't know. Ooh, that's looking nice. Okay, so again, I'm gonna pop this off and I'm gonna, you know, get this thing basically unstuck from the, trying to get my camera, there we go, plugged in. I'm gonna get the bushings unstuck from the blank real quick. And so all I do is I just tap it on my tailstock. And the more you load up, if you load up a ton of CA glue, you may not want to use bushings like I'm doing, because you may get them so stuck that you basically have to cut them off. So it just depends. Like I said, I try to kind of, I'm riding a thin line with how many coats I put on and you know, not sanding through, and also being able to get my blank off of my bushings. All those factors kind of all come together. I forgot to seal the end of that other blank, I think. We're going to do both of them real quick here. All right, so we have CA finish on the, you know, around the blank. I'm going to put a little dab on a piece of paper towel here. And just kind of touch the blank down, the end of the blank, just to kind of seal the end of the wood side so that it doesn't soak up any moisture. We're just putting a little bit on. I don't know if you can see that. Just to seal up the end. And I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to do that to the other one as well real quick. I think I need to wipe off, because I already polished it, but that's okay. Just dab it on there, just a little bit. Just give it a little dabaroo. And that's not gonna, that's not a piece hanging off the end. That's just a little bit on the end. I like to use the like sanding thing just in case there's like a jagged piece kind of actually hanging off the end. In this case, all we've done is just applied a little to the end. That's not going to interfere or cause any problems with the with our assembly. So I'm actually gonna spray this real quick, just to make sure that that's dry before I put it back on, because I'm going to put it back on the lathe on the bushings, and I don't want to glue it on from the inside there. So we'll just put that down. I'm going to clean off and make sure there's nothing going on the ends of our bushings here. What can happen is if you have those little pieces, is it could crack your finish. You don't want that. And I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but I'm thinking, there might be people kind of coming and going on the stream, so. I wouldn't use anything metal to do this, but you could also just grab something that's kind of plastic instead of your fingernail if you don't want to. I probably have like a gouge in the end of it now. That's okay. Got to cut my fingernails anyway, obviously. Get in there. Okay. All right. So what have we done here? Did I do the green? I did the green, but I don't think I did lengthwise. I don't want this thing spinning. I don't think I did this yet. Okay, and then I'm going to move on to the gray. And this is the Zona paper. So I got links down in the description to a lot of the things that we're using here. Sandpapers and the polishes, the tools. Pretty much have, most things down in the description. I also have more links on my website, on the tools I use page. And if there's something that you're like, what do you use for this? And I don't have a link or I haven't said it or mentioned it, just shoot me an email. There's a contact form on the website. You can ask, in the chat here. If you super chat, I'll see it for sure. Or like on Instagram. I don't look at the DMs and stuff on Instagram a lot, or Facebook. So I do apologize for that. It's just I can't keep on top of everything. And those are the ones that kind of suffer. Email, I'll definitely get back to you though, if you have any questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to point you to someone who does, maybe. All right, so I just do the first three, the gray, green, and blue. You can buy, a lot of times the Zona comes in a pack and it goes up to white. There's like 5 or 6 of these colors. But I switch over to the Magic Juice polish, liquid polish stuff. I get better results using that stuff. You can just go through the Zona. A lot of people just do that. Some people buff. I used to buff. All kinds of different ways to get to the same result. Again, just like the CA finish, whatever works best for you, that's the one that you want to use. There's no right or wrong. Okay, let's get these papers out of the way here. We'll pull our magic juice bottles over. We'll apply some polish. Okay, I need to get some more blue. Maybe not. Yeah, I do. No, I don't. We're good. We got enough blue rags. I use the blue shop towels for the first 4 steps. Get this up to about, I go around 1500 or so. So I just try to get kind of apply it somewhat evenly to the blank. Not a lot of pressure. And then just kind of find a clean spot on the rag and wipe off the excess, and you're good to go. Step 1 down. Turner's Warehouse, if you're looking to try this stuff, they have a small sample set that I think I want to say is like $15. I mean, to try this stuff out, and it'll go a ways. It'll make quite a few pens, so it's not like one drop. But for $15, you can try it out and see if you like it. You know, and most people that have tried it out, that have watched and been like, oh, maybe let me try it. I've heard a lot of people say, yeah, I'm actually switching my thing up. It works better than what I was doing. So, you know, I definitely recommend, you know, check it out. I'm not saying it's the best, and again, it's up to you what works the best, but a lot of people like it. And it surprised me. I didn't think I was really going to care for it. And it was one of those things, I kind of pitted it up against, I used to buff, and I did one half, I think, you know, of a pen buffing my normal way, and I did the other half this way. And I went, well, the results are it was quicker and it looks better. So I was like, oh wow, okay, looks like we're switching. I really did not think that was going to happen, because I've tried using like the pastes in the past, and I haven't really been like super thrilled with those. Buffing always tended to work better in, you know, like on larger projects and stuff. So I was kind of like, I don't know. But I'd heard a lot of good things about it, so I thought, oh, let me try it out. And I went, wow. Works for me. One of the things that I like compared to buffing is you don't have to take the blank off the lathe. Like you can do all the steps right here without even doing anything to the blank. Not that it's a big deal, but I know, you know, like I have my old lathe, the Comet, you know, I have that set up full time as a buffing machine. So like that's fine. But I know that a lot of people don't have another lathe sitting around that's just set up with their buffing wheels. So, you know, for somebody that has to, you know, dismantle their entire lathe and then set up buffing wheels, I think it's a no-brainer. It just, you know, much easier. All right, now I'm going to switch to the Scrub It pad. I'm going to be careful with it. They will rip, but they're a little bit, they're not like a paper towel. So I'm just going to try to be careful with it and not let it wrap up on the blank. My theory is these things are even less abrasive, like non-abrasive basically. And so, you know, I know the Scott shop towels, they have to be somewhat abrasive. They have to be. So I switch to these things when I get to the final 2 steps, in the hopes that I'm not, you know, the application pad isn't, you know, reversing the polishing that's happening. I don't know. I don't know what like the grit levels are of, you know, paper towels and, you know, all these different steps. That would be kind of an interesting thing to find out if I could. You know, what grit is the paper towel I'm using compared to the step 4 through 6, or what, you know, 1 through 6 really. I'm not entirely certain. So Michael Harding, you know, with Stadium Blanks, makes this stuff, and I still haven't seen him actually do a demo with this yet. But I'd like to see what he actually uses to apply it. I don't know what he recommends. I haven't asked him. But if you go to like a pen Turner's Gathering, or a lot of probably the pen shows possibly too, check out, see if he's around, Stadium Blanks. And he might be able to give you even more information about this stuff. All right, here we go. Oh man. It's looking, man, that wood, oh, that looks so good. Oh, I'm digging it. I'm digging it. All right, let's zoom out a little bit. Boom. Can't really find too many positions that don't have reflections going on here. That's looking pretty sweet. Digging it. All right, and then after you do the polishing, you pretty much always have, let me set this down real quick. Get a little paper towel square. You always have a little bit of that polish kind of between the bushing and the blank, so I always wipe that off before, and you can really see it, so it's like white. I always wipe that off before I assemble. You don't want that junk between the component and the blank. Same goes for the other side. Just wipe that off real quick. Now we're fresh. All right, let me go get the thing set up. Whew. Here it comes. The moment we've all been waiting for. Put a little paper towel down so I don't stick anything in resin. Let's get the camera set up so you can see. Zoomed in pretty well. Okay, and we're going to be putting this on a Junior Anthony kit. I think I'll put some gloves on, I don't know. I get a little bit crazy when we get to this point. I don't like handling the final product. Where's the blanks? There they are. All right. So this is a black titanium kit, pretty nice one. It's got some gold accents going on the finial there, and the band. Get in the middle of the camera there so it picks up on all this stuff, hopefully. I don't know. It doesn't want to focus very well. It's a pretty nice kit though, I will say. Okay. Let's see here. So I made some marks. This is a little tip. Hopefully I can see them. You know, when the blank was one long blank, so like, you know, like this, you know, you can make a mark on the outside, but then we just turn that away, right? So what you do after you drill and tube it, come back and put marks, which I'm pretty sure that it goes just like this. I can actually see the swirl pattern, so I don't really need marks necessarily to tell me how to put this together. But what I did was I put marks on the inside of the tube. Now, might be a little hard to find. There's one, I think. And there's one. Is that, yep. There's my marks lined up like that. All right, so that's just a little trick, you know, that way you can make sure that you get everything lined back up. Now, this is always the tricky part. You got to be kind of careful because on the inside, you know, the threads on the inside of this thing, let's see if I can get centered here. Those are plastic, all right? So you got to really, I've kind of destroyed quite a few thread pieces in the past because I've actually like pressed the parts together. Now what we're going to do to make sure this lines up is we're going to screw the nib into our threads, make sure it's, you know, fully seated, and then we're going to put our parts together on there and press them in a little ways, not the whole way though, okay? That's the key to this. Now I got to double check and see how do I, yeah, just like that. Okay, so it's kind of hard to see once you get things going. So I've kind of laid them down how I want them. I think I've got it. So what we're going to do here is kind of press these together a little bit. Got that one. It's wanting to go one way only. I'm going to very carefully take this apart. I think I didn't mess anything up, so press that guy home. And we'll press this guy home. And we should, yep, we got everything lined up. So like I said, it can get a little tricky sometimes, but and the other parts don't really matter. You could maybe mess around with trying to line things up a certain way on the postable cap, but I don't know. I don't know how important that is, you know. I don't, basically. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so we can pop our ink down in there. Okay, we got that part done. Now, question is, where are we putting the clip? That's always the tough question, isn't it, guys? Kind of like that, actually. That's not bad. Kind of digging that. I don't know. What do you guys think? Oh, it's kind of crooked. My other option that kind of looked pretty good. I mean, you can do like the kind of where it's, sometimes I like where it's kind of like on an angle, the burl or something, or some line is on an angle. But I don't know. That was my other thought right there. I'm kind of digging that though. What do you guys think? Holy Grail, Holy Grail. Nice. I don't know. I'm kind I don't know. I might be kind of leaning towards this. Somewhere in this area. Really tough. What do you guys think? Thinking this was probably a better kit actually in the end because I had to switch it up. I really like the gold accent. I don't know. It's really tough. I really cannot pick. Cover the burl like this. I don't know. I really kind of like that. But I kind of like this as like the front of the pen over here. I think that's the best swirls and everything. It's a little darker down there. But I don't know, I'm kind of thinking like that. Okay, so like this, I think is what everybody's saying. I'm just going to set it down for a second just to make sure. Longer. Yes, burl. Yes, burl. Okay. Just like that. All right, perfect. Things kind of trying to wiggle around here, so I'm just going to make sure that it's going the way that I want it to. Still got a little bit left. We can kind of make a micro adjustment here. All right, hammered home. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I think I agree totally. Are we on camera? I gotta look at what I'm doing. Where am I at here? Why can't I get on camera? My finger's out of the way. That's pretty sweet. I like that. So this is one of the triple start threads. So these line up like this. What I find is I start it on these kits backwards and it ends up being correct. So just a kind of a little quick tip. Like I said, it's supposed to go like this. So it always ends up that I start it with the right way going backwards, like opposite, like this, and the threads line up the right way. So let's see which ways. There we go. Let me zoom out a little bit. Yeah, that's a pretty cool looking pen. So big thank you to Brian for coming up with the idea and spurring me on this one. I have one thing to do, and this is what I recommend to anybody that's doing these kit pens. Make sure that you get yourself a little bit of paste wax. Get whatever kind. This stuff's kind of expensive. It's just a smaller can and it's easier. Any kind, just some sort of wax. Heck, it could be a candle. But get some wax because the threads squeak and they're terrible. And when people are gonna, you hear that? Terrible. You don't want that. Okay, so that's like the worst thing, you know, if a friend or a customer or whoever gets this thing and they have to take it apart and it starts squeaking at them, they're going to be like, what? So get yourself a little bit of paste wax. All right, I just put a little bit on a paper towel and just put a little bit of wax on those threads. Trust me. I got a little bit excited there. There's a little bit more than a little bit of wax, but that's okay. Okay, just a little bit of paste wax, and listen to this. Oh, it just slides perfectly then. You don't get any squeaking. Oh, it's just, I couldn't handle it. My wife would die. She can't handle like the chalkboard sound, scratching. Just, am I on camera? I don't know. A little bit of wax, that's all it takes. Like I said, I've literally used a candle in the past to do this on a pen when I was like boxing up somebody's order. This was many years ago, but and I didn't have any paste wax. I forgot to do the threads at the shop, so and I ship it home, and so I literally just rubbed a candle on there, and that fixed it. So just a little bit of wax, and it'll make your threads not screech at you. Oh, pretty sweet. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. So let's switch to this view. Yeah, the Red Mallee burl, it's a good one. Brown Mallee is a good one. Mallee, any kind of Mallee is a good burl to use. So it's an Australian burl, and I don't even stabilize it or anything when I'm doing casting. Just dry it out fully. And if you go to last week's live stream, if you want to see this blank, the blanks being made, you'll see, and I kind of explain that. But it's such a dense hardwood that there's really no reason to stabilize it. It's not going to add any benefit. It's just going to make it harder, and it's already super hard. So it's a pretty awesome thing, and it's pretty widely available if you look around at the burl sellers. Mallee is a pretty either brown or red, can be found all over the place. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this thing. Oh, I got to put the ink in it. Let's see here. Just did all the waxing. Now I got to put the ink in. Ooh, looking good. Yeah, that's a pretty darn good pen. So again, thank you to Kid Cooper for coming up with a great idea for some blanks. The subscription boxes they're kind of split. We did 2 different tests. They're split half and half kind of. So you guys will see that. So let's see here. Come on home to daddy. Nice. I love it. You might want that. Yeah, I put the ink back in. We got it. Don't worry. Let's see how it writes. I never do that. I'm always like, I'm fascinated with the blanks, guys. That's always my main focus. Let's just get a piece of paper out here. I was making some notes on this. See how this sucker writes. Hopefully it'll write good. Oh yeah. Looking good. Looking good. The writing test has been performed. Nope, I think I put it on backwards. There we go. It's still backwards. Triple start threads, guys. You got a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right. Nailed it. Yeah. So anyway, guys, thanks for joining the fun tonight. That's all we got tonight. I will get all the stuff, the invoice set up for you, Brian. Get this thing all ready to go. I'll probably share a little bit of a Instagram reel of it finished up before we get things rolling. But pretty fun. And these hybrids are pretty easy to make. Again, go and check out last week's live stream replay if you didn't see it. It's a very simple casting. There's not a lot to it. Just get everything set up, drop it in your mold, and then pour some resin. And then the turning, again, I do think that I would probably recommend going with the standard cutter. I think that it's going to be easier to get between the transitions between the wood and the resin. It just tends to work out easier in most cases. However, if you want, the insurance policy, then just go with a negative rate cutter and it'll work fine. It's just not going to work as well on that hard, that wood. It just doesn't work as well as it does on the resin. So you'll kind of notice a difference when you get to that harder density. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed watching this come together. I had fun turning it. It was this is a really good project, really fun. We'll have something next week, something new. I have some ideas for experiments that I want to try out, maybe with like colors and dyes and micas and different stuff. So that's been on my brain for a while. We got a few things to dunk as well. So I'm not sure exactly what we're going to work on, but it should be pretty fun. We'll do a little bit of resin casting. Or worst case scenario, I have been doing a lot of, I've been making these fountain pens. So this is my most recent one. Maybe, I don't know. I might do a little bit of like kind of messing around with that, turning and stuff down the road. We'll have to see. I'm not sure. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll be back in action next week, next Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll do something on the stream. It should be pretty fun. So anyway, guys, I hope you have a wonderful evening tonight, and I will see you guys all on the next stream, Saturday, 2 p.m. Pacific time. Have a good one, guys. See you then.